This is part 4 of proving the Trinity. Actually, part 3 of proving the Trinity. I'm sorry. It's part 3 of proving the Trinity, and when we left off, we were talking about Jesus being God. We said that certain qualities Jesus has, the same qualities of the Old Testament talking about God, is proven in Jesus in the New Testament. And there's attributes that are attributed to Jesus from the New Testament that were of the Old Testament proven of God. Internal, Revelation 1:17, those are divine attributes. Revelation 1:17 talks about Jesus being internal. Creator of all, Colossians 1:16. Omnipresent, that means that he's everywhere. Ephesians chapter 1 verses 23, talking about Jesus being everywhere. All-knowing, John chapter 21 verses 17. John chapter 21 verses 17 talks about Jesus being all-knowing. John chapter 21 verses 17. Let's go to John 21 verses 17. This is Peter speaking to Jesus. He saith unto him the third time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? Peter was grieved because he said unto him the third time, lovest thou me? And he said unto him, Lord, thou knowest all things. You know everything. Thou knowest that I love thee. So, Jesus knows all things. Let's continue. Acts of supernatural. Matthew 8 verse 3 talks about supernatural acts. He gives life. John chapter 1 verse 4. Jesus plainly gives life. John chapter 1 verses 4 states this. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. So basically, it says that Jesus gives life. Just like the Father has power to give life, so does the Son. Strengthen believers, Philippians 4:13. A very famous verse. It says, I could do anything that Christ that strengthened me. I could do anything in Christ which gives me strength. Rose from the dead, John chapter 2 verses 19-21. We discussed this more deeply in one of the programs that I think I did, proving the Trinity through the resurrection. Works in sanctification, 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verses 2. All qualities of Jesus and all qualities of God. There are some who argue that Jesus is not God because he's called the firstborn in Colossians 1:15. Let's read it. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. Because by him everything was created in heaven and on earth, and visible and invisible, whether there be thrones or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. Notice that it says everything was made by Jesus and was made for Jesus. That's very important to notice that. But look at this. It says that he's the firstborn over all creation. Is that saying that Jesus had a beginning? I'm here to tell you it's not saying that. Firstborn has two different meanings. We know Jesus to be the firstborn of Mary. He was born first. And as a person that is born first, they have a special inheritance. They get paid more when the parents die than the others. But firstborn also is a position given by God. It has two meanings. It means to be born first, where you get a special inheritance, and it also means a position given by God. There's three persons in the Bible, which is Jacob, Ephraim, and David. In the Bible, none of them are born first, but yet all three of them are called firstborn by God. I'm going to give the verses, but we're not going to look them up. You can look them up in your own time and in your own house. Just keep on rewinding this video, and if you could download it, download it. Genesis 25 verses 24 to 26. It talks about Jacob not being first, it was Esau. Genesis 32 verses 27 to 28, you see the name of Jacob being changed to Israel. In Exodus 4:22, you see God saying, "Let Israel, my firstborn, go." God is calling Jacob my firstborn in Exodus 4 verses 22. And if you see Genesis 25 verses 24 to 26, Genesis 32 verses 27 to 28, you notice that Jacob's name was changed to Israel, and Jacob wasn't born first. It was Esau. Ephraim is called firstborn. And he wasn't born first. His brother Manasseh was born first. We see this in Genesis 41 verses 51 to 52. We see that Ephraim was born second. In Genesis 48 verses 70 to 20, you see that Jacob blessed Ephraim over Manasseh. In Jeremiah 31 verses 9, you see that Ephraim is called firstborn by God. David is called firstborn, and he was the eighth of his brothers. He was the eighth born of his brothers, and he's called firstborn. 1 Samuel 16 verses 9 to 13. And if you read that, you'll see that he was born number 8. In Psalms 89 verses 20 to 27, you see that David is called firstborn. So as you notice, firstborn is not only that you're born first, but it's also a position given by God. There's other arguments about Jesus being God, and it could be disproven. Many state that Jesus being called begotten proves he is not God, because they state that the word begotten means to give birth, which it doesn't only mean that. Let's see what it means. In the Greek, the word begotten is the word monogenes, which it means to give birth, but it also has the meaning of unique. It also means only born. It also means only. So it doesn't stop in begotten. It's also the word used for child, but it means unique. And if we look at Luke 7 verse 12, Luke 8 verse 42, Luke 9 verses 38, you see this word being played out. You see it in Luke 7 verse 12, he was his mother's only son. The word only there is the word monogenes. In Luke 8 verse 42, for he had an only daughter. That was talking about Jairus. Only right there is monogenes. In Luke 9 verse 38, he is my only child. The word monogenes. So the word only is more better to state that Jesus was his only. He was the only. There's other in the NIV version, you don't see the word begotten, you see the word only, the only Son of God. So it means unique. In the gospel, it is used as meaning unique, one of a kind. Jesus is the only one of a kind. John 1:14, as of a father's only son. John 1:18, it is God, the only Son. John 3:16, that he gave his only Son. John 3:18, name of the only Son of God. Hebrews 11 verse 17, ready to offer his only Son. The last verse in Hebrews 1:17, the last verse shown is talking about Abraham. And if we was to go to Genesis 16 verses 15 to 16, Isaac wasn't his only son, but was the one unique, only one of the promise. In him all nations will be blessed. Genesis 17 verses 15 to 19. So begotten or monogenes, that word monogenes, doesn't just imply being created or coming forth. Even if he was born, when he became human in life. Never had a beginning. He never had a beginning before. Even though Jesus became human when he was born of Mary, he always existed before her. Because remember what Hebrews 13 verse 8 says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. His life existed before the world was, because he created everything. John chapter 1 verses 1 to 3 and verses 14. Remember what it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were created by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And then verse 14 says very clearly, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. The only, better word to mention only there, only of the Father. He could be considered the only begotten Son of God on these terms because he was born as a human, but that doesn't imply he was made or had a beginning, or that he was the one of a kind son of the Father. To state there was a time the Son was not is to state that there was a time when the Father was not, because for him to be the Father, we have to have the Son. It is just a way of talking about position. Can you imagine the Father having a beginning? No, it doesn't make no sense when it comes to the Trinity. Do you imagine the Son having a beginning? I don't think it makes any sense. It's basically position that it's referring to. How could God explain to somebody in our own terms how the Trinity is like? There's only certain words that can imply it. People argue, but John states that Jesus said, "Believe in God, believe also in me." John 14 verse 1. Jesus is asking for the same belief that a man would have of the Father. If anything, Jesus is claiming right there, believe God, believe also. He's claiming to be God himself. The same belief you give to the Father, I want you to give to me. A good example of that is in John 5 verse 17. And with this, I'm going to read it and then I'm going to just talk a tiny bit more and then we'll be done. So Jesus answered them, "My Father works always, I too must work." This saying made the Jews all the more determined to kill him, for not only had he broken the Sabbath law, but he had said that God was his Father, his own Father, and in this way he had made himself equal with God. We're going to look at some other examples. Let me look at another example. We see this in John 5 verse 19 to 23. I want to read this when we start in the full program, because let's read in the next program because time is limited. Proving the Trinity part 4 is the next program.